To start us off, can you introduce yourself and what you do?
Sure. My name's Jason Fischer, and I'm the division head of emergency medicine at the Hospital for Sick Kids in Toronto. So that's a role I've had since 2015. And in that role, I oversee the operations of the ED, the physician and physician assistant group, and the scholarship that goes on within the division.
Jason, what is one way you're currently using or actively exploring AI in pediatric emergency medicine that excites you the most?
Yeah, so emergency medicine is all about patterns and probabilities. And so it's really ripe for emergency medicine. And I look at it, there are different layers of opportunity. So, what we've tried to do is build in automation with AI integrated into that. So, things like prediction, natural language processing. But there's layers, and I thought I'd just kind of give you six examples of how I see the layers and where the opportunities are. So the first is around operations, and I think people are pretty familiar with that: patient flow, resource utilization. So we're using AI to begin with in diversion opportunities. So how can we deliver the right care at the right place at the right time? And so we use it to help select patients even before they come into our triage. So when they've arrived on site, we use a tool to allow patients to self-select and go to our rapid access clinic. We're also developing a tool that will allow them to return later at a time when our emergency department is less busy. So we really feel like that'll improve the operations overall as a whole. We also use a lot of AI in our real-time analytics and volume prediction, and we use those predictions to open care areas. We're working on admission tools, and so we can predict who's going to be admitted, so we can start the bed planning process right from triage. And we're trying to do a much better job of care coordination across teams. So an example of this is when a mental health patient comes to our triage, the system automatically picks out that this is a mental health patient and signals to our mental health team that they need to come down and see this patient. And that's reduced some of our time to be seen by 50%. I think the second opportunity is in provider experience. This is really anything that reduces provider burden, especially non-provider work, and improves well-being. And so I think there's been a lot of focus on digital ambient scribes, and we're playing around in that space, or beginning to a little bit. But the project I look at that's been the most helpful, I think, in helping us with well-being is something we call our LARC score. And this is a system that looks at the number of patients that are in our waiting room waiting to be seen. And it does a very objective assessment based on their complaints and their risk level and the timeliness their care requires in letting us know when we need to add resources. So traditionally, backup physicians may have been called when there were so many patients waiting in the waiting room. But this is a much more sophisticated way to have the team stop, think about how they can readjust their resources, and then call in backup resources as needed. And so that really helps physician well-being, because there's not as much subjective thinking around when a backup physician has to come in from home to help, and helps objectify kind of when the ED is safe and not safe. The third opportunity is around patient and family experience. So I think this is a huge untapped opportunity, and here we're working on precision wait times. So making sure that there's really an individualized time for a patient to expect to be seen. And this, we know from speaking to our patients and families, this goes a long way in improving their whole time in the ED. Little things like when they can time moving their car, when they need to go pick up their other kids, when mom and dad can swap out. Little things that just knowing when they're going to be seen really helps, and knowing when the next step in the journey is. And we also leverage this into kind of what we call precision medical literacy, which is tying documents for patients and families around particular illnesses and patient information to their chief complaint while they're waiting. Then we move into kind of the clinical areas, and I always think about it as like clinical layer one is that direct care. So the evaluation, diagnosis, therapy, and disposition. And this is where there's the most regulation. And so I think we've been kind of dipping our toe in here with some good ideas, but we really focused on that evaluation phase and making sure that we're putting safety first. So precision, proactive safety. So we have a system that'll pick out patients that are high risk. This sends a notification or a flare to a physician assistant that we have in a dedicated role that comes and sees that patient. And that's a patient that could have traditionally been lost in a little bit of a surge that was happening. So imagine all of a sudden 40 patients come to triage. How are we going to pick out that, that scrotal pain patient that needs an ultrasound right away, or that patient that has high risk cardiac disease? So this system allows us to do that in an automated fashion based on natural language. And we're also looking at automated medical directives. So how can we reduce the time and really move patients kind of up that patient journey so that some of the work is getting done before they're even seen by a provider. And so we're working on that, doing some silent trials, looking at regulation, and you can read about some of that work already in the literature. I think there's two new areas that we're exploring that I think have a lot of potential. One is what we call kind of clinical layer 2. This would be ambient care. So how much passive data gathering and analysis can we do when patients are in our ED? So how do we bring the most value from that ED visit? So when someone is there for an asthma exacerbation, what can we learn about them from, other mental health surveys, from videos, from other imaging that is indirectly linked to their care? The example I always bring up is when we're doing chest x-rays, can we develop systems that will screen and look for any non-accidental trauma? So this is an area we're exploring that we kind of call ambient care. So passive data and analysis. And then the third layer of this clinical realm would be longitudinal care. So how do we use artificial intelligence to fit this ED encounter into the longer patient journey? So when we defragment that journey, can we find new insights and provide, better health span? And so we're looking at how we do that. And of course, none of this work could have been accomplished in our ED without our team and without the commitment of our division to really develop the skills we need to embrace this future. So we're fortunate to have Doctors Devin Singh and Amy Zapersky, who are AI researchers. We've made a dedicated investment in future-focused skills. So those include informatics and AI, but as well as the enablers. So medical design, translational research, QI, epic builders, simulation. And now we're trying to pull that all together. So Dr. Leanne McLean is leading something we call IDEAS, which is informatics and implementation, health design, environment, AI, systems, and safety. And this is a program that brings all of these folks together to innovate as a team and to really engage fellows. And so we're really excited about that.
That's all really fascinating. As you implement all of this and as AI becomes more and more prevalent in our emergency room, what's one major challenge that our field will have to work through to safely and effectively integrate AI into clinical?
So I'm going to give you 3 instead of 1, if that's okay. I think the biggest one is dispelling the myth of the perfect status quo. So really reinforcing that we have too many medical errors, we're not efficient enough, and really no provider has the cognitive ability to manage everything we're asking them to manage. And so we really need to motivate and incentivize change and prioritize the use of artificial intelligence. So I think that myth that everything is okay and we shouldn't invest is something we really need to keep working past. I think the second one is really is going to be this tension between regulation and what our patients and families expect of us as consumers of healthcare. And even getting to the point where I think we may be faced with potentially an ethical dilemma in failing to improve care delivery rapidly enough because of regulation. And so I think regulation as a whole is going to be a challenge, and we need to all, participate in making sure our institutions and our regulators are working with us. And then the third is I really worry about our dependence on centralized AI. we all are building our AI on hyperscalers, and at some point they're going to look for a return on investment. And we need to think about how beholden we're going to be to them when that day comes. And so I'm really hopeful that we start to think about decentralized artificial intelligence and other ways to use these tools, these algorithms, whether that's at the bedside using kind of bedside devices that are equipped to manage, or full decentralized systems. I don't think we want to end up in a position where we're as dependent on any centralized system as we are today with systems like Epic and other archiving systems.
Jason, as you look forward, say 5, 10 years ahead, in addition to all of the work you're already doing, what's one additional AI driven change that you think will most meaningfully reshape the day to day of our pediatric emergency department?
Yeah, so I think it's funny. There's this thing called Amara's law, which is that you overestimate the effect of a technology in the short term, but then underestimate it in the long term. And I think we're kind of falling into this. There was this initial hype when chat came out a couple of years ago, chat GPT, and then we're kind of in that trough of disillusionment. And I think that, I'm pretty convinced we're going to have what most people call artificial general intelligence by 2027, if not sooner. And I think that's going to lead to this rapid exponential change, and things are going to get really weird from 2030 to 2050. And I think the things we're going to see in particular in pediatric emergency medicine, we're going to see a lot of external changes based on artificial intelligence. And I think the biggest one is going to be AI enabled biotech, for lack of a better word. So AI drug discovery and computational biology. So molecule discovery using digital twins for clinical trials. And you're going to see all these technologies like mRNA vaccines and gene therapy really change the patient populations that are using our emergency departments. I think you're also going to see a real blossoming of important consumer AI products that allow families to consolidate the individual medical information they have for their kids. And not only will agents go out and retrieve the data on children, analyze that data, make insights into how to promote it, and guide them in their every day, but it'll also provide families with a lot more agency in what they need to do. And so I think our EDs are going to be shaken up a little bit by what happens externally with consumer AI products. But I think the most exciting thing will be how the pediatric emergency medicine physician changes. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot um, because I think everyone is kind of holding their breath and assumes that there will always be a human in the loop. But that may be the case initially. It may change, but I think there will be a change in how we look at the role of the physician. And so I really like a framework that Akram Awad from the Boston Consulting Group uses. And I think you can adopt it to physicians. And the future physician will really fit into one of three buckets. There'll be pioneers and guardians and stewards. And each of us as a physician will find ourselves in one of these three groups. Pioneers will be driven by curiosity. They'll really want to explore and they'll want to look at new sciences, new philosophies. They'll really be the ones that go out and are drawn to new therapeutics, computational biology, climate medicine, planetary health, space medicine. They'll be the ones that are creating the future and using AI to do that. The second bucket of physicians will be guardians, and these will be folks that are driven by the survival of the human race. And that sounds lofty, but really what it's about is they'll be motivated by ensuring that, AI works safely as a diagnostic and treatment tool, that there's system integrity and trust, that there's ethical validation, and that we really safeguard vulnerable patients as we automate more and more. And so these will be the people that are keeping us safe, the guardians. And probably the biggest bucket and where most people will find themselves are within the group of stewards. And these will be physicians that are driven by meaning, how they live, connect, care, and contribute to their communities. And they'll really be essential in what we do. And I could see stewards really being the glue of the system, the ones that are, looking after continuity of care and ensuring compassion and dignity, and how we interpret illnesses as humans, and how we deal with belonging and vulnerability, and so I think you're going to start to see over the next 5 to 10 years, physicians sort themselves into these buckets. And I think that's going to be really exciting for the future physician workforce.
Jason, thank you for joining us. This has been really informative. Thanks for sharing about your work and your perspective on AI in a pediatric emergency room.
My pleasure, Joshua. Thank you.